Hello, my name is Glenn Rogers, and I'm your host on All About Cops, the show that is giving you the pulse of the people. We're bringing the issues to you that really matter as it pertains to law enforcement. So stay tuned for many great interviews with people just like you. Okay, we're here in O'Fallon Park still with All About Cops, and we have a very special gentleman here. And I think this is a gentleman that doesn't feel too good about most police. Brother Zaki Baruti. Brother Zaki, how are you?
I'm great, then. How are you today, sir? Good.
All right, brother, let me ask you something. There's been a number of shootings lately with children, and, you know, they're putting a lot of heat on the chief here. And do you think this problem is something that the police can solve, or is this bigger than the police? There's all these crimes against children and so
Yes,
forth.
the crimes against children and just the general violence is, of course, much larger than the police department. It's really reflective of the priorities of the society on the local levels of government, state level of government, and the national level of government. I maintain as head of the Universal African Peoples Organization that we have to redirect our priorities as relates to solving the problem of crime and violence in our society. First of all, we have to recognize that violence has been a way of life since the beginning of this country, first of all, from a historical viewpoint. Then secondly, in terms of deaths by violent means, also since the inception of this country has been the norm. In fact, as an organization, we publish a newspaper that's called the African News World, and in several editions of our newspapers, we have had a statistical study of the number of homicides committed in America, say for instance like a 6-year study or 5-year study. And first of all, there's always every year over 25 to 30,000 people murdered in America, one of the highest totals of so-called civilized society or Western nation.
Do you think guns are the problem?
Now it's beyond guns. It's a psychological and an economic issue as we see it. We see it from this perspective. Number one, the more intense of the crime is based on the economics of a particular community. And so that's a starting point. When you have high unemployment or underemployment, then that leads to crime. It leads to people trying to survive by illegal means in terms of the drug culture. And so with that said, the way to solve the problem, getting to the solution, is that first of all, on the federal level, there needs to be a redirection of the budget, the budgetary expenditures. We maintain that the United States military budget needs to actually be cut in half, and those dollars funneled into the urban areas where much of the crime does exist.
Do you think, cutting you off, there's a lot of crime that exists in St. Louis. Are the police doing a good job in your opinion?
Well, you know, I always find that it's ironic that for certain crimes, it seems like we can never find who committed the crime in terms of homicide, except if it's like a
What do you mean certain crimes?
Like homicides. We have a high rate of unsolved crimes in our community.
Well, just say it like it is. I mean, it's said that when there's a black death, you can't get police to really do what they do when there's a white death. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
And so it becomes an issue of priority of lives. And so many times, as I see it, the lives of black people are undervalued compared to the majority of white communities. So policing, of course, as it relates to our community, has to be done on a whole different level. In fact, our organization says that they ought to have community control of the police departments. And what does that mean? That simply means that every police department across America, the police force ought to reflect the racial and ethnic composition of the community in which they work.
Are you looking at my questions?
Number two, police officers ought to live in the community in which they work. And number three, there ought to be effective civilian review boards with subpoena power in each of the communities. And so,
do you think the public ought to be able to vote on a general vote as to whether or not a cop is fired?
You know, absolutely. In fact, police officers ought to be assigned to neighborhoods, and the people in that neighborhood ought to know those police officers. and they need to get outside of their patrol cars and also do some walking the beats in the neighborhood.
Sure.
Again, in terms of the whole issue, and this is not a recent issue. Historically, police departments have been predominantly white in areas that's majority black.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's just like outside and invading the army, in terms of.
Well, in some cases, they say it's because they can't get enough blacks to apply. What do you think about that?
Well, it's ironic you get enough blacks to apply for the U.S. military. So if you can get blacks to apply for the United States military, why can you not get blacks to apply for the police departments? I think it's a false.
I think he got somebody on that one.
I think that's a false narrative, and that if there's an aggressive methodology to attract black people to their positions, then there ought to be. And it's important because I'm going to use the example of a recent uprising here in the state of Missouri, Ferguson, which I used to live out in Ferguson. I was living where Mike Brown was actually murdered back in the 70s. I was a housing activist that they would not renew my tenant lease because of my outspokenness at that complex. However, at the time that I was living there, Ferguson was majority white. At the time of Mike Brown's murder, it had transitioned to 68% black in the city of Ferguson at the time of his murder. Although at the same time, though, if you looked at the composition of Ferguson City Council of 6 members, only one was black. As a direct extension of that, you had a police
Is it
force.
because the people don't vote?
That was part of one of the reasons, but as an extension of that, you had a police force at the time of Mike Brown's murder. There was 53 officers. Right at that number, only 3 were black. That is, in our opinion, madness. Those are the issues that, again, lead to.
But you know what? I've had so many people tell me that I have interviewed that black cops treat them as bad, and in some cases worse. I've had some say black cops treat them worse than white cops.
Well, if they
So is it really a color you're looking for or quality?
Well, we're looking for equality, but by and large, most of the incidents in police violence and the reaction to police violence, what they say as riots, I see it as uprisings, are a reflection of many times white officers brutalizing or shooting black men. There are instances, and I can cite one instance where we were able to get one black officer fired named Charles Hubbard in Pagedale, who shot a young black youth named Arthur Dobbins. And we were able to get him fired, as well as we followed him around to other municipalities to make sure that he was not hired in other municipalities as best to our ability.
Let me ask you a question.
So let's be clear. We're saying inappropriate behavior of any police officer, be
No
it
matter
black,
what the color.
Yeah, they need to be totally penalized.
Okay.
And that penalization to include firing, as well as depending on the nature of the incident, also incarcerated.
All right, okay. I'd like to know something from you. The way that a lot of the black people that I've interviewed have voiced it, they seem to think that cops jump out of the car and they get out of the car with an attitude of antagonism. Do you think that's something that you've noticed and something that needs to be corrected?
Absolutely. Again, it goes back to who patrol our community. Many times you have police officers from outside our community who come into our community with biases, racial biases, ethnic biases. And those are the kind of officers that don't need to be in our community.
Well, but it's the black city councils then that's hiring them, like in these communities. Is the black folks that the black folks elected that's hiring them? So what do you say about that?
I say that in those instances, we need to have progressive people in those communities that begin to seek office and replace them, and so that we can further the whole concept that whoever working in a community need as a police officer need to be from within that community. Going back to what I said earlier, every police department ought to reflect the ethnicity of the community that they patrol. Going back to Ferguson, at the time of Mike Brown, instead of almost 93, 94% of the police officers being white and the majority of the population of Ferguson being black, that should be reversed. That should have more black police officers there, again with sensitivity training and again being held accountable for their actions. So I would not justify any person of any race being disrespectful verbally or physically to any citizen of any neighborhood.
You know, you and I have been, we've known you for years and so forth. I've been supportive of things you've done and vice versa. And, you know, I have a police background. You didn't feel bad about me as a police officer. Why is that?
Why? Because I respected your understanding of how you have to treat citizens in the community. You know, you were reflective of the motto, serve and protect. And of course, any society needs those to serve and protect, you know, because we do have a criminal element in our community that does need to be checked. And I'm not for any criminality. I say any criminals that offend the people, just as police officers, need to be punished. So, you know, we can just even using the whole situation of many children being shot and murdered. I say for anybody that know of anybody who has done those shootings, you need to do the right thing, and the right thing is to report those people who are criminals.
I agree with you 100%. In fact, what I've been saying is that the phone is about the most powerful thing that you people have, and you're not using it. A lot of you know who did the shooting. You know who's doing a lot of the crime. You don't want to be what they call a rat. Well, what do you say about that? Do you think that that mentality needs to change and they need to start talking up and helping the police, whether they're white or black?
First of all, that mentality has to change in terms of the whole thing of snitching. I say that from this perspective. If that person who has that belief of not snitching, if their child or their brother or their relative is shot and murdered, then I'm sure that they will want somebody to come forward to find the perpetrator of, you know, their family being victimized. So, but another
and you can do it anonymously,
right? But another critical thing too is going back to reprioritizing monies. Many times, I understand that we do not have enough money in the witness protection component of the circuit attorney's office. So again, that needs to be reprioritized where there's money placed so that people who do have the strength to come forward do not feel that their lives would be jeopardized by them coming forward.
You know what? Now you're on a hot subject now, because who could actually be the most effective in coming forward, and that is the police officers who work with these corrupt cops. There's a lot of good cops out there. I know it, but there are some bad apples, and because the good cops are being silenced or prefer to be silent, the bad apples are rotting in the whole group. Now, there's a federal officer that says that there should be some type of like witness protection for cops that come forth and give you information like they did with Kim Gardner. Some of the cops have come forward to give her information. Do you think there should be some kind of protection in law for these cops?
You know, it's ironic that you're saying that. Here we got to offer protection for those who's supposed to be protecting us. That's a oxymoron in a sense. But of course, first of all,
well, at the point when the cop comes forward, he's not doing it as a cop. He's doing it as a person.
Right. Of course, they need to be, first of all good police officers, if you're good, then you need to break that blue wall of silence. That's first and foremost. And by doing so, then not only should other police officers be supportive, but the entire community should come and support. And
whether the cop's white or black.
Whether the police are black or white. Anytime a police officer sees something corrupt or our citizens being violated, they should come forward and on spot arrest those who's violating the rights of everyday citizens. That's it. But see, the deal is you have too much fear among the good cops, and that's one.
Well, I'm gonna tell you why the fear is. The fear is that you've got to go out there on the street at night, and you're gonna be sitting in alleys by yourself, and no politician is helping you, nobody else is helping you, and you're known to be the rat. Okay, and the rat might get caught in a trap. That's what they are afraid of.
I understand that fear, but at the same time, we have had heroic people in our community, such as Dr. King and hosts of folks who are fighting for us to have the right to vote, that stood up. And even as activists, you know, we get our little death threats and what have you for being outspoken. But if we don't have a better society, then people don't have to man up or woman up to do the right thing, and that's where I advocate.
All right, we have it from Zaki Baruti. He said, cops, do the right thing. Public, do the right thing. One more thing. Parents, a lot of these kids are worse. They're straight up criminals. Do the parents need to do some policing?
Well, you know, when we talk about families, we also got to put this in a historical perspective. Many of the families in our community have been divided and broken up behind the historic oppression that comes from the government. I'm going to highly speak in terms of specifically of during the bill, as an example, Bill Clinton, who pushed the 3 strikes you out and the whole mass incarceration behind the abuse of drugs.
And look, and now they're legal. Some of these guys are in jail now for things that now America is making money off of.
Absolutely.
Marijuana, do you think they all ought to be released? The prisoners that were arrested for those charges?
Absolutely, as long as if it was a nonviolent offense, and if a person was in possession of a drug, that's a health issue. You know, and then with the legalization of marijuana and people making money from that, that's a damn shame that people would still have to be behind bars. And I say from that perspective, going back to the families, America, first of all, we got to understand America has the highest incarceration rate than any other country in the world.
Why is that?
Because it targets people who look like you and I.
All right, okay. All right, I want to say thank you very much to our guest here. Another person who's enjoying this wonderful day and has got some strong views about everything.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Brother Zaki. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
This is the show all about cops, where we're going to be hearing from professionals in law enforcement and the public and seeing if we can make things better. I'm firmly persuaded that the reason that the public has such a bad time in dealing with the police is that they don't understand the laws. Nobody is teaching them the laws. Therefore, I have taken all the mistakes that I've seen people make in 22 years in dealing with the police, and I have put a training together that will help you to understand why police do what they do, and you will get a better understanding of the laws. You can get that by going to www.insidethelaw.us. That's www.insidethelaw.us. I highly recommend it. If you've enjoyed this show, you should go to www.insidethelaw.us and learn what you need to know about the police. Okay, we're still here in O'Fallon Park with All About Cops, the show that is the pulse of the people. And we have with us today, we have a husband and wife. What's your name, please?
Danielle McCoy.
And?
Kevin McCoy.
Okay. All right, let me ask you, there's been a lot of talk about police shootings and the things that pertain to the kids being hurt. Do you think the police are doing a good job?
The police's job is to get home safe, and I feel that they're doing I don't want to say the best job that they can do. I feel like they should be doing a better job, but
what should they do differently?
Well, in regards to the policing, I think there needs to be some sort of like oversight, because I feel that we can't really police the police. You know, we see the videos and things that are coming out about excessive force. You know, they want to stop a lot of people from videotaping when, you know, there's an arrest or something that's going on. And I feel like the citizens don't necessarily know all the rights that we have. The officers know all the laws, but we don't know these things. So I feel like there just needs to be more education between the police and the public.
Oh, that's a good intro for my training. www.insidethelaw.us. She said that she needs to know more about the laws. You can get that at www.insidethelaw.us, so go do that. But let me ask you something now. There's been a lot of commotion in St. Louis because kids have been being killed. Do you think this is something that the police can really solve?
Absolutely. I mean, there needs to be some sort of community engagement. You know, police come into certain neighborhoods, they don't engage with the community, there seems to be some distrust. So if there was more trust between the cops, the citizens, I think things would be a little bit less tension.
Okay, so Everybody seems to say that the police need to get more involved with the public where they patrol. But there's a shortage in a lot of cities with police officers. And so I guess they're trying to do the best with the ones that they have. Do you feel safe with the police? If a police officer pulled you over, do you feel safe?
Oh my God, how many times have we been pulled over just because of the type of car that we're in? When we first started dating over like 10 years ago, we would get pulled over every weekend because of the type of Chevy that my husband drives. We were actually even profiled and followed through University City when I was 5 months pregnant. And I mean, that just shot my anxiety through the roof because you don't know what the outcome is going to be of the situation.
So how far did the police, was it a marked police car or an unmarked car?
There was no police regalia anywhere on the vehicle, no police signs. It was just almost like tinted windows. You couldn't see any lights. You couldn't even see the driver. So if I call 911 and let them know that someone's following me, I can't even describe the driver. I can only say it's a silver Chevy Malibu, and that's it.
So ultimately, what was it?
It was an undercover cop, I suppose.
And why was he following you?
He followed us because he said we were circling the block. We weren't circling the block. We were actually thought we were being maybe going to get robbed. So we turned a few corners to see why this car, unmarked with tinted windows, was following us. Then we found out when he hit the dash cam, the dash lights, it was police. And when I asked him why he flashed us, he said, well, you were circling the block. And I said, well, I circled the block because you followed me, and there was nothing that said police. You had tinted windows.
All right. That should definitely make you feel nervous. So after he pulled you over, what did he do?
He said, I told him, I said, you know, I was getting ready to call 911 and let them know that somebody was following us. And he said, well, if you ever feel followed, yeah, you should call 911. And that raises my anger because I'm thinking, but you're the police.
You're the cops.
All we were doing was going to drop our friends off after going to an exhibition at a museum. So, I mean, it really put a bad taste in our mouth because you wanted to profile us because of whatever may have been happening in the neighborhood. So you singled us out.
I mean, let me be clear about that situation. We were approaching a stop sign. There was a car unmarked, tinted windows. I hit the flashes to be courteous as a driver, like, oh, you can turn. He didn't do anything. So I hit the flashes again. I rolled my window down to wave him to come on. The person didn't move. So I put my blink on, made a left to drop my friend off. After I did that, the car got right behind us, kind of at a distance. And I said, well, maybe this person wants to park. So I'll scoot up. I scoot up, the car scoots up. I said, okay, well, maybe he doesn't want to park. He's trying to get by. So I scoot up and I pull over and get out of the way and wait for him to go around. It just scoots up a little bit. So at this point, I'm getting a little nervous. So then we decided to go to the stop sign and hang a right. Well, he follows us.
All right, well, let me, bottom line, the police officer was following. Now, let me ask you this. I know you do a lot in art. You're an art major and so forth, and you've done a lot with that. You've got a lot of friends that are not black. You've got a lot of friends that are white. Do they run into the same kind of problems that you run into?
No. They can't even relate. They can't relate to what it feels like to be pulled over or the anxiety that me as a black man, I experience when cops get behind me. No, absolutely not.
Do you feel better or safer with a male cop or a female cop?
I guess a female cop because I would, hope that, I don't know, I guess a female cop. I'll just leave it at that. I have had male cops just pull us over maybe because I was going a little faster, but all the situations turned out to be just fine and I was let off with a warning. But I would say female, black female.
Do you think police... Answer that.
I would feel safer around a cop that's not nervous. That's what I feel safer around.
So you're saying sometime when the police stop you, the police officer appears to be nervous?
Oh, absolutely. Hand on the gun. Oh, absolutely.
Okay. If you could be the one that would determine whether the public would be able to fire officers and hire officers, would you like to see that done? Let's particularly say fire officers who have done something wrong. Do you think the public should be able to vote for that?
Absolutely. I mean, they're policing the public, so the public should have some say.
Should the proportion of officers that are working in the department be the same as the proportion ethnically of the people that they patrol?
While that would be fantastic, we also have to look at how many are applying for those positions and if those positions are available. So yes is the answer to the question, but it also just depends on if, there's enough black officers to patrol in a predominantly black neighborhood. And if there's not, then I feel like those officers that are either of another race, black or white, Latino or Asian, whatever, should have some sort of training to know how to insert themselves in that culture, in that community.
Okay, there's a big concern now about the children that have been shot in St. Louis. I personally don't think this is an issue that the police can solve. I think this problem started on a bigger level, a higher level. We talk about things like Oliver North bringing drugs into the United States. I think that the federal government needs to get involved. They help create the problem. They need to get involved. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. I think it's a much bigger agenda that's in place, and they have people in place to inflict what they want on us, the brutality that we see.
Where do you see law enforcement going in the future?
Down then up.
Wow. Okay.
That's real.
All right, now I've got one last question for you. If you had to see some changes being made, what changes in law enforcement would you make rather?
Ooh.
I would start off with more training so that these officers understand how to deal with people that have maybe mental issues or disabilities. We see a lot of stories where someone has a mental issue and the officer is still maybe firing. Now, I'm not gonna go through what was the officer seeing and not understanding, what was happening. But I think it all starts with training and knowledge, and then it needs to start to go all through all the different ranks.
Well, I think that officers are basically, they're using their powers to stop situations, even when it's deadly force. I personally think something has happened. There's too many shots being fired unnecessarily, in my opinion, and I've got 22 years as a cop. How do you feel about the use of force, the way it's been done by police officers with the profiled cases?
I think it's unnecessary. You think about Tamir Rice, you think about Eric Gardner. To answer your previous question, there needs to be those officers that cross the line, that use unwarranted deadly force, they need to be arrested, and they don't get arrested.
Why do you think that is?
You tell me.
Do you know?
I'm not a police officer. I have no idea. I feel like they're being protected somehow because of the paperwork and things that their story versus the dead. The dead can't tell a story.
Do you think that the police officers, considering everything, are worth keeping, or should they be dissolved?
You need police officers. We wouldn't be able to be out here at this park and enjoy a good time with families. So I'm not saying that all cops are bad, but there are some that definitely cross the line that don't have good intentions. Those are the ones that need to be corrected or arrested.
All right, you've got it. These are the real McCoys here. All right, thank you very much for the interview. If you have an issue that you'd like to discuss with us, or you just like to shout out to us, or just give your comments, you can reach us at tvallaboutcops@gmail.com. That's tvallaboutcops@gmail.com. Also, you'll be able to reach us very soon on social media. If you've enjoyed this show, you should go to www.insidethelaw.us. There's a lot of information that'll teach you how to deal with the police.